the brake zone, and then
Agreed, definitely. So these are their regional offices. I'm sure that you guys have already seen this, but I just wanted to include this. So Singapore, Myanmar, Taiwan, Malaysia, Germany.
Third tub, so the 28 cars, which is having a tub change, that tub has now been removed out of the garage, and they're just now working on rebuilding the 28 on the left-hand side and the 17 on the right-hand side. And those are the two cars that we've not seen in this session. I think now we've pretty much seen everybody else. Just Hub Auto Racing, the only other one that we haven't seen, although they're now out. So hadn't set this time in the early part of the session. Tom Blomqvist aboard that car. So there might have been an issue for Hub Auto Racing.
So the #1 Rebellion car, I think all drivers have completed their laps now. Bruno Senna is back in the car after starting the session.
Ayrton Senna's nephew, of course. Bruno's a great guy, very experienced in this race now. With Rebellion, since they went to the LMP1 category, I think he did a P2 year.
Someone hit the dust again on the exit to the corner just before Tete Rouge.
See how distracting that would be, though, can't you? If you go into that and the lights start to illuminate the smoke and the dust rather than your path forward. Yeah, that's a little jump.
That corner there in a GT car is actually a corner. In a prototype, it's actually just pretty easy flat through there. So it's quite a difference. So the car that Bruno came across was a GT car. Obviously, just dropped the wheel off, got the car back under control, got it back on track again. But that's the difference between the high downforce prototypes versus GT.
341, 42 kilometers an hour, around about 213 miles an hour, I think. That Toyota, fast. Back up, brake board, so you can see him lift off there, and then he hits the brake around the 100 board. To the second chicane.
That's the thing, you know, as it gets dark like that, you obviously have done the laps in the daylight, and then you kind of got to trust what you did in the daylight and then trust that it's going to work in the darkness as well, because obviously you can't quite see as much, but you know you brake there in the daylight, so therefore you've got to just do the same in the darkness, and it's a little bit disconcerting to begin to...
Oh, the tub is still there.
Yeah, the tub is still there, and I think that guy was taking the fuel tank out. So obviously the tank sits behind the driver, where the filler is here, and the fuel tank will be okay, so they're taking the fuel tank out of the damaged tub, and we'll stick that into the new one. This is the car that's getting repaired.
And that can be a really tricky business. Remember, years ago in the Group C era, one of the NPTI Nissans had a fuel cell leak, and they spent most of the race trying to do that. It's just a bag. It's a rubberized bag or Kevlar armored bag, but any tiny little piece of anything that pierces that, and you're going to leak fuel. Ooh!
That's a replay of
the dust.
Ferrari.
Yeah. That's kind of where I thought maybe Bruno Spengler might have run out of road.
And this is what it looked like from Senna. Actually, it doesn't look quite as bad.
It was 2 cars ahead of him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the thing.
Look at all the pointy bits of stone and gravel, though. That's not gravel from a gravel trap. That's stones from the basic underlying
Earth.
earth here.
Yeah.
So it's not rounded and rolled. That's where all the sharp little bits that puncture tyres come from.
And this kind of work that we're seeing IDEC Sport do on 2 cars would usually be done over days in the factory. Very rarely do we see a car with so little, bare chassis, bare monocoque with so little bits on it, sitting in an open garage at Le Mans. So huge work for IDEC Sport, and a real achievement already if either of those cars make it to the grid on Saturday afternoon. The mechanics will have already felt like they've done a 24 hours before they even started.
The real heroes, in my view, of the race. You can see the amount of work and effort that goes into preparing 2 cars. because ordinarily they only run one car in ELMS, and those guys would have had a lot of work, and 7 days a week for the last few weeks to get ready for the last ELMS race. And you know, you've got to imagine this weekend they are not going to sleep, and tonight they are not going to sleep.
No, for sure not.
So, you know, we think about these guys not sleeping over the race for the 24-hour race, but imagine having 7 days a week, a fair old few weeks to get ready for this race, and then arrive on Thursday and start running, and then have an all-nighter. And they've still got to work all day tomorrow, and then prepare the car as well for the race, and then do another all-nighter on Saturday night. Real heroes of the race. Of course, the drivers, yes, they work pretty hard, but actually they go and have a break whilst their teammates are in the car. The mechanics have one crew per car, and they don't get to go away, and you know, they literally get given a packed lunch throughout the race and just mosey on through. So hats off to those guys, they work bloody hard.
Grab sleep when they can. Toyota Gazoo Racing, number 7, Kamui Kobayashi, up to within 4.5 tenths of the fastest lap time. So a little bit of a push last time from Kamui. He's doing it again on this lap, so we might see an improvement once more. We're still a good couple of seconds away from their pace in most of the sessions, to be fair, including our qualifying session earlier on. But the Rebellions have certainly found speed in this session in comparison, and a little bit closer to the Toyotas. We don't really expect them to be racing each other, certainly in qualifying anyway, but it's nice to see them not 5 seconds away from each other like they were in our qualifying session this evening. Riding on board with Michael Christensen. This is the car that had a puncture with Kevin Estre aboard a few moments ago. Still the fastest of our GT Pro cars, and actually has done a decent amount of laps, 17 laps in total, in comparison to the AF Corsa Ferrari behind, which is 5 laps to the less. So, you know, there are a couple, if you look down the order, there are a couple of cars that have done very few laps in this session, and certainly as yet have not managed to get all of their mandatory laps in to make sure each driver has done 5 laps in qualifying, which is, 5 laps in the dark, which is the important thing.
Yeah, so Kevin Estre did 14, so Michael is the next driver in. He's done 2 so far. So, yeah, they still have the 3rd driver to get in, who is Vantour, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vantour Lawrence.
So, yes, another 2 hours to go, so still plenty of time, but I'd imagine Michael might be doing a longish stint now. The other thing we found out is that it was the first stint on a new set of tyres that Estre, on his 14th lap, blew, and they think it was debris that caused the puncture rather than just a tyre failure.
Yeah, because the tyre, we were talking about it earlier, they should be able to do a double stint on those tyres.
Yeah.
And this time, these kind of conditions.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, now it's cool, so the tyres aren't working as hard as they would be at sort of midday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I always find, though, that the tyre manufacturers always say, no, it's debris. I never actually heard them. Yeah, I think that's tyre failure from our design. So I never sort of saw them put their hand up and say, yeah, we got that wrong. So question, you know, it's very difficult because the carcass had separated from the shoulder and the surface. So
they can tell a lot by just cutting the rubber of the carcass, though. These guys know what they're doing, and you know, a company like Michelin, who have been in motorsport forever and been the sort of go-to brand, the top brand. Yeah, they know what they're doing, and I think if that really was a 14 lap stint, then it should definitely have lasted another 14 laps.
For all of you wanting to know where Racing Team Netherlands have been in this session, well, they are one of the slowest of the LMP2 cars. They've been right at the top of the timing screens for the majority of our sessions when Guido van der Garde and Nick de Vries have been able to go and get laps in. But I think for the moment, Fritz van Aert is just pounding in the laps. I mean, love to know how many laps he's managed to do so far today, but it's been a fair few. And the moment he's doing 3:44, so about 15 seconds off the pace. And the key thing is, as we see Nick de Vries getting ready to go in, there is the car. So Nick de Vries will certainly elevate that team to a little bit higher. You're only as fast as your weakest driver, Jamie, right?
Yeah, and they will prioritise to give him more laps, as we see him now on the screen, coming through the final chicane. Yeah, he's the silver driver. No, he's a bronze, is he? He's a bronze. One of the few bronzes in LMP2, predominantly held by silver drivers, isn't it? But a true gentleman driver.
Yeah.
And don't forget, it's 15 months since he last raced in the dark.
Yes.
And the other thing to say is the only bronze driver to have won an LMP2 race in the WC in WC history. So I think it was Fuji from memory.
Not one that only had about 3 or 4 laps in the drop.
No. This was
racing conditions.
This was
last
a
season.
proper job,
Yeah.
and showed that they turned the real corner with the switch from the Dolores to the Orica, and a much happier Fritz van Aert as a direct result of it. So
Yeah.
he's finding his pace. What he struggled before with has been consistency, and I suspect that 3:44 might well have been a bit of a traffic lap. 3:42 this time.
And that's why he's in the car now, because he will be doing night driving and he will want to make sure that he is keeping as much speed in the car as possible. The other two, it's guaranteed they'll be able to do it. That's why they're in the car. And Fritz, like all the other gentleman drivers, wants and needs as much nighttime racing running as he can get, because that's going to be really key. That's when you're more likely to give away time than during the daytime when everything's quote normal again. So.
And also, you know, you talked about it, the pro drivers, there might be half a second a lap round here, long lap, maybe 6 or 7 tenths between all the pro drivers, whereas the AM drivers, whether you're silver or bronze, it can be seconds difference. And,
But
you know,
on a clear track, it might be, 2 or 3 seconds because it's 13 kilometers. In traffic, every time they double think themselves, should I go for this gap or not? That's another second, another second, another second, and especially at night, those tough calls that professionals make instinctively because they've done it so many times. Professional businessmen don't have that experience and that confidence, and as a result, they are likely to drop more time by trying to make sure they bring the car back alive during the nighttime stints.
But he's got a huge amount of motorsport experience, even from a young age, even though ultimately he is the gentleman driver, the money behind it with his supermarket company Jumbo. He has been racing since a young age. He has a fleet of ex-Formula 1 cars. He's done the Dakar 5 times in a truck. So he really does have a huge amount of varied experience. He also owns 3 Spitfires.
Really?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia.
Well, everybody loves a Triumph, don't they?
And he was the very first sponsor of Max Verstappen. So he's done a lot of supporting of various young drivers, including Nick de Vries.
And in fact, he has not only is he a big supermarket chain and supports the drivers personally, but he supports Dutch motorsport wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
The Jumbo race days, which are free admission, a 3-day weekend at Zandvoort featuring Max Verstappen and a whole host of other things, that gets 300,000 fans in.
Also personal sponsor, by the way, for another young Dutch hopeful in sports car racing, Job van Uitert.
Yep.
And somebody's backed him and has put Job in the car when Nick de Vries has not been available for service. So very much backing his home motorsport.
And there is just the possibility that on Sunday, Fritz van Aert could not only be a Le Mans winner in LMP2, but his team may also win the Tour de France. So it could be a very big day for Fritz van Aert. Yeah, so, the Jumbo Visma team is super competitive.
He's just starting his 19th lap of this session as well.
So this is a double stint, a nighttime double stint for him. And, do you remember when a couple of years ago, Fernando Alonso had the track to himself when it was wet? And then they were saying, okay, do you want to try the intermediate now? Do you want to try the wet tyre now? Do you want to... So this is what happens when you stay on the slick when it's this wet, and this is what happens when you change. Well, that's exactly what Fritz is doing. He's learning how the track is going to evolve through a double stint on the same tyres as the track temperature changes, as the darkness changes, and all of the other stuff. So it's just experience that money can't buy. You need that time.
Yeah, and he's following another car there as well. So the last few corners he's been, so that gives him a basis as well that can help him to speed up and move his pace up to keep up with that car that's just passed him.
Round and round he goes. So Nick de Vries waiting for his turn. Of course, part of what they're doing here is not just doing the driving. It's a very happy Portuguese.
He just has a smile on his face every time he's camera on him.
Listen, even when he was driving the M8 GTE, he had a smile on his face, so you know it's him rather than the car itself.
The brick, you mean?
But yeah, that was one of the words for it. But when Fritz comes in, it'll be a full-speed racing pit stop with driver change and everything else. Because again, as a gentleman, he doesn't want to be giving away 10 seconds in a pit stop.
Soft tyres on the Porsche.
Yeah.
I presume that's what the S is.
Or slick.
Or slick.
No, genuinely,
Could be,
because if it was a wet, how would you know?
Yeah.
How's the car balance when you can speak? That's pretty good. A little bit not understeer like before. Low speed, high speed is good.
You know, you'll live with that, won't you? Bit of low-speed understeer, that's the chicanes and Arnage.
Yeah, and the high speed was good. That's what you want at Le Mans as a driver. You want a car that's easy to drive. Alan always had one of those, but
he needed one of those.
So it's that year that it wasn't easy at the Porsche cars, though, and he went in the wall for, I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of Audi's plan to eliminate a certain US photographer.
You guys are so funny.
They just kept aiming for him.
no, the best one was in Petit Le Mans that year when he was going to the grid and he put it in the wall.
I don't know what you could be talking about.
I went out the pit lane and I was like, I think there's an Audi in the wall.
Not like teammate Yannick Dalmas, who at the first ever Petit Le Mans selected another gear as the car took off. So there you are. Soft, S is for soft, M for medium, H for hard, I for intermediate, wet and full wet. Now, not all of those options are available to all categories.
Now, and that's 17 laps it was saying there for Daniel Serra. I wonder if that's
so this will be a double stint on the tyre he's into now, because
it's 2 times. That tyre's been on since the start of this session, I think.
Right.
So Collardo has done a 2-lap, a 1-lap, a 4-lap, a 3-lap, and this is Serra's 5th lap.
yes, that car has only done 15 laps in this session, compared to 24 of the 91 Porsche, for instance, and 20 of the 92 Porsche. So Ferrari haven't done as many laps.
But just remember that these tyres that are run in this session also run in qualifying. It's for Hyperpole where they get the additional 2 sets of tyres. So therefore they're still juggling the tyres from FP1, FP2, we're now in FP3. They've had qualifying, but they also have FP4 tomorrow as well.
Yeah, so that'll be another hour. But, you know, the cars that we saw coming out very late in the session, I think all of those were trying to sort problems rather than going, no, we're good, because they've only had 6 hours of running. Normally we'd be sort of 10 hours of running in, plus a test weekend by now. So I think everybody desperately needs every minute they can have on track, and anything that's taking away from that, in the end, might catch up with you.
For me, one of the best sounding cars on the grid, the Porsche 911 on board here with its flat 6.
Well, it's one of the few that echoes back to the very beginning of this car's history, not just this particular car, but the 911's history at Le Mans and Porsche's history at Le Mans. That flat 6 bark accompanied them pretty much the entire time. So, you know, even when they had front-running GT cars or front-running prototypes, there was still 911s racing in privateer hands, in factory hands, in semi-works hands, and it's just, you know, the only constant engine that has been here from the beginning.
Well, yeah, Alan, your win in GT1 is not quite the same engine, but the architecture of the engine is the same, no?
I apologise, I wasn't actually listening.
We're talking about the flat 6 engine of a Porsche 911, still a glorious sound, and
Still flat, still 6-cylinder, you mean?
yeah, from when you won
Yeah.
Le Mans in the Porsche GT1.
Yeah, but even long before that,
Yeah.
they had that engine running in road cars and also in races for a long time, and it served them very, very well. Obviously, technology moves forward and then things do evolve from there, but it's fundamentally gets the center of gravity very, very low.
Metzger?
Metzger, exactly.
Yeah.
And it gets the center of gravity very low, and also in terms of that, it's also quite short in length.
Yes.
And so from that perspective, it's very good from the vehicle dynamics as much as it is from the actual the engine power itself.
Yeah.
Right, having made them leave their dinner early, we're now going to send Ben and Peter and Jamie off to find the most essential piece of Le Mans equipment that we didn't get in the supermarket today. Which, the French for which, Ben, is what? Something bouche, yeah. Yeah, corkscrew. So that we can have a little apéro after the show, as is our wont. So, meanwhile, with Alan McNeish and Graham Goodwin, I'm Martin Haven, and we will continue on chatting. Graham's headset appears to have died, or he's killed it, one or the other. So we'll catch up with that. So we are now into the 10 to 12 session. This would be the witching hour normally on a Thursday, where you would very likely see, particularly on an evening like tonight, after a long hot day, cool of the evening, good track conditions, you would see the fastest laps coming in. That's not going to happen now because we've already done qualifying this afternoon. So now it is about getting your race runs right, finding out how the car performs over a full tank of fuel, and most importantly, if there's any human way you could possibly somehow at some stage squeeze an extra lap out of the car by wearing your featheriest of feather boots, or whether you are stuck with a stint length the same as everybody else. And all the teams will be working really, really hard now, just trying to fine-tune the setup and make sure they've got what they need for their drivers for the race. 91 Porsche back in the garage.
3 lights on the side. Is that running third? Is that correct? It is indeed.
3 lights on his shirt.
Indeed. One quick thing. We've seen a fair amount on social media about 1 or 2 of the mics being set a bit low and just swapping around, and seeing that helps. But I know that a number of people didn't hear Bruno Spengler's explanation as to what happened to the Bicolis. What Bruno said to Alex on pit lane was he'd gone wide on the exit at Tête Rouge, over the curbs, and grounded out violently. The car had briefly got all 4 wheels off, and that put him into the barrier. That was the explanation that Bruno Spengler gave. I know a number of you were asking about on Twitter and other social media, so sorry you didn't hear that. So it gives a good impression of just how matte that red is on that car. The adjustment at the front there, so the bumper at the front of the 91 Porsche is off the car. International sign language being employed again.
Having a bit of a search as to when the last time we had Marshall's post numbers in the hundreds, and I can't find. A couple of people on Twitter have found maps from 2014. I know that sectors came in when we introduced slow zones, so the track was cut up into a number of sectors, not timing sectors, but physical sectors where slow zones and next slows and green flags and so on were distributed, but that didn't necessarily always correspond to the Marshall's posts. And the Marshall, because we had this conversation, we now have Marshall's posts from number 1 to number 33, number 34, actually, number 35 actually. So number 1 is the flag Marshall's post at the start line, 35 is going into the Ford chicane. But it used to be that whatever distance your Marshall's post was from the start line, if you were 8.2 kilometers away, your Marshall's post was post 82. If you were 12.2, it was post 122. But now it's not. So I'm just trying to find out. Just because now I need to know. Looking at the G-Drive car of Jean-Eric Vergne, sharing with Roman Rusinov, and those two have been a partnership over a number of years in European Le Mans Series, World Endurance, and here at Le Mans. The new boy to that is Mikkel Jensen, who Graham will know from European Le Mans Series. He's been essentially a GT driver up until this season, so or 2 seasons ago. So, I mean, was he
LMP3 champion from last year.
from last year, but was he champion in a Ferrari a couple of seasons ago?
Now
He
you're asking,
was, wasn't
he's
he?
very rapid.
He was in a Ferrari, definitely, I'm sure.
Yeah, very rapid. Rusinov did a 10-lap stint. 3:40 was his average. Jensen did a 10-lap stint, 3:33.9.
Wow.
Verne is now on a 8-lap stint, 3:33.8. And so Jensen definitely is... now, it's difficult to tell tyre life and everything else, but Jensen is definitely, at the moment, looking like what in the top 3 of the fastest in LMP2 on averages across the actual stints themselves. The other person that's been very quick is Job van Uitert in the United car on a 33.6, and that's a 10-lap stint as well.
I think someone was discussing on the show a little earlier about this crop of very rapid silvers. I know Job van Uitert was mentioned, Mikkel Jensen was mentioned, several others were mentioned. Most of those guys, by the way, were initially upgraded and then downgraded on appeal this season. It was a strange year this year with the FI driver rankings this year.
I think you've got to remember as well that it depended when the championship started. So this, the super season, it started in the previous year.
Correct.
Or this current season, I should say, it started in the previous year. And so therefore, if they could get upgraded for one championship, being the European Le Mans Series, because that only ran in 2020. But because this started in 2019, then it wasn't able to be upgraded until the end of this current championship, which now, as we know, runs on to Bahrain. To be honest with you, I don't look at them as silver or golds or platinums or whatever else, because that's just a sort of colour that and a badge that someone gives you. I look at the lap times, because that doesn't
Absolutely
lie.
right.
That
Completely
actually
right.
is the facts of life. And whether you're a gold or a platinum or a silver is just something that you can sort of stick on your blazer at the end of the day.
But what we've got at the moment, as a couple of the guys were saying earlier, is this rich kind of vein of talent that's coming through. And we've mentioned 2 or 3 of them. There are more than that. And it's a great time to be watching LMP2 racing.
Well, they come through the LMP3 category, which is something that we were discussing earlier on about the sort of benefits of that category. And I think there's one other factor as well. Their driving style is brought up in a different generation. And so they are more akin to this sort of just get on and actually go for it. And they're young and they're dynamic and they're not frightened to take a risk. They're not frightened to have a go around the outside. Okay, sometimes it doesn't come off. We saw that in Spa with a big, huge shunt as they're coming through traffic with Thomas Laurent.
I was about to mention Thomas.
However, you know, these things happen. It's a law of averages to some extent in sports car racing that one of them is going to go wrong at some point. But I've got to be honest with you, I think the generation that's coming through has got a big, big future ahead of them.
I think so. And if even half of what we hope for from the future of sports car racing, and we know, I think we said again earlier, there'll be a lot more information coming tomorrow on some of what's to come in the next generation of sports cars. And I think a lot of these guys are looking forward to the potential opportunities that come from that. Mentioning Thomas Laurent, I think he was one of the very first of this new batch that came through LMP3, and what a success that's been for the ACO ladder. Coscat Racing, but giving opportunities for real talented young men and women to come through in, you know, multi-class racing with the opportunity for seats with, you know, a true bronze driver looking for someone to help them up the ladder. And this is what we've now got. We've got this new generation of, well, my guess is if we started to rake through this field and others, a dozen or more, that in a year or 2 years' time could genuinely be knocking on the door of a proper factory seat.
Yeah, and hopefully we do get more of the factories getting back involved again. As you said, tomorrow is usually a big day at Le Mans with announcements, press conferences going on from different marques. The championship themselves as well, giving out some more information about the guidance in the future of what's going to be happening with the convergence between LMDH and also LMH, and how we see that going forward. So it's Friday's going to be a busy day on track because we've got new Hyperpole, and it's going to be a busy day off track when we've got lots of information coming to us all.
It's part of what makes this Le Mans week every year, you know, something of a buzz in terms of the media side of things and all of you out there that consume that media. It also makes it extremely busy And actually having this compressed schedule, it's keeping us all on our toes. It's a bit of a challenge in a number of ways, but no less exciting. I thoroughly enjoyed that qualifying session earlier this evening. I'm looking forward to Hyperpole in a way that possibly I didn't think I would. Because, let's face it, some of us are a bit traditional and don't like the difference, don't like the change. I'm looking forward to it. I think it could be spectacular. You'd never like to see that.
Don't think I've ever seen that in a Le Mans pit lane for a long time.
That is proper old school, isn't it? If he doesn't get out a lump hammer now, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Yes.
That is some subtle technical adjustment going on there underneath. You can see the front suspension being rebuilt. That's a steering arm going on there. You can see the end of the rack.
Is that Colin Collis?
And that's Colin Collis there, just that was bending down at the front, taking over proceedings.
Dr. Colin. He's a Zahnarzt. He's a medical, a dentist, and very skilled by all accounts. Had to extract a wisdom tooth that had gone rotten from one of his Formula One drivers before one of the Turkish Grand Prix. Tiago Monteiro was whisked into hospital, and Dr. Colin wasn't entirely pleased with the way that the hospital dentist was treating his patient, stroke driver. So did the extraction himself.
Really?
Yes, yeah, genuinely.
I thought you were joking with this story. I didn't think this was a serious story.
Did he use the same angle grinder?
did a long podcast with Tiago among all the World Touring Car drivers in lockdown, and he was telling me this story, and honestly, how many other team bosses could do a root canal?
I've got to be honest with you, I've had a few team bosses in my life, and they're the last people I would want to see in a hospital with me.
Do you think your guys in Formula E think the same?
Yeah, coming at me with a pair of pliers.
You'd be more likely to punch their teeth out rather than do an extraction. Oh. See, now, when you get a team together for a number of years, you learn different things about them, like the boss is a dentist, and you hope you're never going to need that, because suddenly most team bosses, as a dentist, you think of the boys from Brazil. Is it safe? No. and when you've got a team together, you learn that Jamie Campbell-Walter doesn't make a bad brew.
He's very good.
I have to say that he does make a good brew, but it's not perfect. However, there's time to perfect it by practicing more often.
I had a message on social media from Mrs. Kay McNish of Monaco, who wanted to know who had put Alan's mug on the top of our stack of mugs. And was that just so he couldn't reach it?
Oh, dear me. And it was on a shelf.
Refer back to some of our social media.
That's outrageous. Alan's feeling betrayed now.
I'm going to check social media now. I didn't see that.
What I'm going to get is going to get Alan to get on the strategy laptop pretty soon, because what we've got in front of us is a list of those drivers that do need to complete either 5 or 10 laps. We are now, just under 100 minutes to the end of free practice, so the final nighttime free practice for the Le Mans 24 Hours.
If we've only got 100 minutes left, you better start on that lap list pretty quickly.
There's a long list.
Yeah.
There's a long list. I mean, we know some of these guys have certainly worked their way through it, but we'll have a quick look through. That handy piece of kit we've got here will tell us how many laps each of these drivers has actually done in this and other sessions. But it's at one of those periods in this session at the moment, it's not that quick at the top of timing and scoring. One man who has just improved, and I think improved fairly dramatically, is Ant Davidson. Pops up 6th quickest in LMP2 in the 38, Mighty 38 Jota Oreca. And that is a 3:30.837, 10th overall.
Not the quickest Goodyear lap so far today.
No.
That's the 31 Pan. Gonna have to get my head around that Panis Racing are now on Goodyears, because that's not something that we've had to deal with so far this season, is it?
Yeah, they went Dunlop, Michelin, Goodyear. So they've tried everything, really. But they've been quick. They were in the mix at Paul Ricard last time out.
Yep.
And that's why I have to say I'm quite excited by the prospect of potentially mixed conditions for this race on Saturday and Sunday, because that's where I think this tyre war could really come into its element.
Yeah, that's what we saw in Spa, is that the Michelin tyre seems to have a little bit of an advantage over the Goodyear when it's very wet, but in mixed conditions, when Goodyear can run the intermediate, the Goodyear runners are very convinced that their intermediate has a wider operating window, both in terms of wetness and temperature, than the Michelin Inter, and